All right, so here we are again today with another episode of Women in Electronics podcast series. And we are here today to talk to Michelle Jobst, who's with Jobst Incorporated, and somebody that I connected with a long time ago that I'm so happy and honored to have on this program today. So with that, Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Wonderful. It's great to be with you, Jackie, and thank you so much for the invitation to talk with you today. So I have a manufacturer's rep firm that's located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we cover parts of the Midwest. And as a company, I have 2 employees and 3 contractors that help me get all the work done.
Good for you. Well, okay. So first of all, so rep world, I've known a lot of reps in my time because I used to be one. And I wanted to ask you though, because it's funny how in the electronic component industry, everybody got here a different way and just kind of fell into this industry somehow. What's your story? How'd you get here?
Well, my story is like many others where it wasn't a direct line. It wasn't, I grew up in a family business and I had absolutely no intention to get in that business. And I experienced what it was like when my father had a corporate job and what the finances were like, meaning we were comfortable and I never worried about it, to the realization of what it's like when you start a rep firm and you begin building. It was the financials were pretty obvious. So we had a great time. You know, it stood out as, oh, okay, we're doing something different here and that looks different. So I really wouldn't have considered working in the organization if my father hadn't given me an invitation to think about that, because I had gone to school for international business. I had worked at the Minnesota Trade Office, and then I networked into a corporate company in the downtown Minneapolis area called International Multifoods. And I was still working my way to that spot I wanted until they had a hiring freeze. And it was at that point, it was kind of critical in my corporate trajectory that my father said, would you consider working in the organization? And I realized as long as I kept moving, I was going to be good. So in my mind, I was going to go help my dad for 6 months and then I was going to go back on my merry way. And it turns out that small business was the best place for me. And that was like 26 or 27 years ago.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Sometimes we think a temporary stop, it's like sometimes when people buy a house, they're like, oh, I'll just be here for like a year. And meanwhile, it's like 10, 20 years later. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think, I was even thinking, back on how much of my growing up I was really around manufacturing. And it just seemed like some normal things, like I would help out in the business as a kid. My friends and I would play, hey, let's call the principal, but it was on the Fisher Price phone. So it wasn't, we were just playing around. On summer vacations, I would go on ride-alongs with my dad to appointments, and I assumed all other kids did that. I came to find out that's not true. And then even when I was in college, I did a study abroad, and one of the programs we had an opportunity to do was an international internship. And so I got to work in the product development department for a CNC manufacturer overseas. And I mean, that ended up being kind of important for my job, but who would have known?
Okay, so wait, you mentioned your dad.
Yes.
So your dad started the company, right? Is that?
Yes, so he was working at a corporation in the Twin Cities here, and he was on the sourcing side. And then he had lots of manufacturers, reps, and direct salespeople calling on him. And he would say that reps were the best of the best and the worst of the worst. And he ended up buying his agency from a rep that was calling on him for many years.
So he understood truly what was really required. And I really believe that wholeheartedly. And I think it's part of what happens with You see it in our world that manufacturers will use a rep for a couple years, get rid of them, then wait a couple years, get another one back. It's like this teeter-totter back and forth. But really, if you have the right rep and you have the right situation and you see the value, you have the true partnership, that's what it really requires, then magic can happen, but it really has to be that trust factor and all that from the beginning, I think.
100%.
So, okay, so your market, let's talk about where you are and what you're more in the industrial market. Is that accurate?
I would say that at the component level, we represent contract manufacturers who are making components in a variety of different processes and materials. So industrial is a very large part of the industries that we call on, but we also call on defense, marine, playground equipment, medical. I mean, it's pretty varied. And I think that's something that's unique about selling at the component level to OEMs, because other people in other businesses will say, oh, well, I call on dry cleaners or I call on whatever. And if my customers have somebody who is specifying, they have money to buy a tool and they understand what they want it to do, then they are really a target customer. That makes it pretty broad. And it doesn't mean that everybody who falls into that category could be a customer, but I think it really opens up. We really want to be at the heart of innovation. We want to hang out with those engineers. We want to see what they're dreaming about, and if we can help them to get to production faster.
That's really great. Okay, so talking about innovation, so I didn't realize for a long time that Manna existed, and that's how you and I connected actually years ago. I think you had contacted me to come speak at something.
Yeah, it was probably for women reps. I bet it was.
Oh, I think it was for that. And then somehow we got talking about Manna. But I am so intrigued by your story of your involvement with Manna. So first of all, tell us about Manna. Tell us what Manna is, how you got involved, and how that whole story unfolded for you.
Sure. So Manna is a national trade association, and it's really focused on independent manufacturers reps and their principals, or we also call them factories, and professionalism. So it's an umbrella organization. And before I even got into the business, Jobst had been a member of Manna since like the 80s. So I was well aware of every month I get my agency sales magazine. And as a person out on the road, it's been just a phenomenal thing to have when you're out there by yourself and kind of feeling like you're in a bubble, that you've got other people who are writing stories and tips and whatnot, and are in the same, selling in the same channel. So it definitely makes you feel connected. It definitely helps you get educated about your own industry, and it helps bring up the professionalism level, I think, for lots of reps.
I think that's really amazing. The thing that's really interesting to me about Manna is that you span so many industries. So Manna is, like you said, an umbrella organization that's more horizontal, encompasses a lot of industries that utilize reps. So it doesn't even have to be electronic components. It could be whatever, plumbing,
Right.
Who knows what, but it's that umbrella organization that provides the best practices and all the requirements to be a rep and a very high standard. So I really like that a lot. But it's really interesting to me that when I think for electronic component industry is, and a lot of industries are very male dominated, right? And so
Yes.
you take an association like Manna, which would seem like it would be very male dominated, and then you participated in that board, right? And so tell us about that. It's kind of interesting to me.
I agree. So if our organization had been members of Manna since the 80s, and it was an important organization, not only to myself, but to our agency. It wasn't until 2017 that I got asked if I would consider being on the board of MANA. And I think that directly came from Charlie Cohen, who was looking at the time, it was probably 70 years of the organization being around, and there wasn't a lot of diversity. And so he really understood that and wanted to make it a more welcoming place. And so he made a plan, to make sure that when they were considering different positions, that they made sure to see who else was in the pool besides white males. So,
Yeah.
so for me, just again, I became a rep. Even though I had grown up around it, wouldn't have considered it if there wasn't an invitation. And with MANA, it was really Jerry Leth and Charlie Cohen at MANA who said, would you consider? And honestly, I had never thought about it. It was quite an honor, but I wouldn't have thought about it if the invitation wasn't put there. And so it was 2017 when I did, I get voted in to join the board. And then in 2021, I was elected as the chairperson of MANA's board of directors. So in both those cases, I was the first woman in 70 some years. And I also was the first woman who was elected as the chairperson of MANA's board. So quite an honor. And, it was interesting when they were looking for a chairperson. I wasn't sure that I wanted to do that. But one of the things I know for myself is very much when you see somebody who looks like you doing things at another level, it just makes it look like it's possible. And so I was very aware of that when I said, hey, that would be a good thing to do, not just for me, but I think to make other women feel welcome and seen and get some exposure.
I love that, Michelle, because that was exactly my story, where I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing now, leading women electronics, if it wasn't for seeing a couple of key people, women that were leaders in the industry. And there's something right in you that just rises up when you see that. And I think we have this presentation that I do now, and it's called Traits of a Modern Leader. And I go give this around the industry and different companies, and one of the presentations I give, and it shows the difference of a traditional leader versus a more modern leader. And that really interesting thing is there's this one slide I put up, and I ask people to think of what was their thought of a traditional leader. And typically, in this image, it's just all men, but not even women catch it, not even women. And at the end, I show them how the picture, there's no women there. And so for us as women to know that we never had that image, we never had the image. Even now, women don't see it. And so to see that, all of us, it's very impactful. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. And I think that, when I came onto the board, a lot of times what you're doing is you're talking to other people And because some of the other work that I've done with women reps and with the special interest group that MANA created specifically for women members of MANA, I think I've connected with a lot more women who then also have considered going out for positions, of leadership. And now half the board at MANA is women.
Wow. Okay. So that made a difference, and it obviously went really well. And here's where to pause in the conversation, though, because this is where, for men listening, I want them to understand this is not putting you aside. When we allow women into leadership roles, it's an expansive effect. So we expand industries, we expand associations, we expand, but women, as far as what we're doing, women electronics, and 95% of all women I talk to, people aren't trying to overturn men. They're not trying to replace them. They want them there. We all respect, admire our colleagues, like you said with Charlie. I mean, you couldn't be here without him. And I think we all feel that same way, right? You would never put aside Charlie, right? You just honor him and respect him so much. You just want to come alongside Charlie and help expand the efforts, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's, it expands the key role, not just key roles, but what people can bring to the industry as far as expertise. It's good to have a mix of thoughts.
I agree 100%. And we all know from the research that women, we tend to bring, we think a little different, and it's a really good balance at the table. So, having said that, okay,
Yep.
what have been some of your barriers? So, we're here talking about women and leadership rising, and really you're a trailblazer because you've made some impact already in areas. You said 77 years, right?
Yep.
At Manna, there was no women in that board position. So now there are. You broke the barrier. Now there's a half women, which is amazing. It's probably going to help really expand so many industries. So, but what have some of your personal barriers been? What are your thoughts on that for people listening to
Mhm.
validate even now what some of the barriers are?
Yeah. I honestly have felt pretty welcome into my industry, even though, walking in, I'm probably calling on a male mechanical or electrical engineer. Maybe I get to see women in purchasing positions. But to be honest with you, sometimes being an only in the room also means I'm something unique. So I didn't, on most of the time I'm calling on men. It's lovely when I get to see women. I enjoy working with both, but it's because I am not, as a woman, seen that often in engineering sales. I think I am welcomed in almost every situation. So I haven't seen that so much as a barrier. And I don't know if it took me like a second to notice, like, well, where are all the ladies? But over time, I maybe I've got 3 engineers that I call on that are women. We have some work to do. But I think other things from a barrier standpoint, I'm in a local business women's circle where it's other business women owners who have employees. And I think one of the barriers for many reps still, after all these years, is people don't seem to understand how our channel works. And for some reason, they think that we are, extra in the system when really we are bringing a cost effectiveness to that role of sales, outsource sales. Somebody has to do it. And if you can find somebody who's bringing together synergetic lines, who, over time, we're just seeing a lot of change in all capacities, whether it's buy sell agreements and new ownership, things like that. Reps tend to be selling for lines, when it's a good fit for many, many years. And we've got a couple lines where it's over 40 years. So during that time, I might have had different presidents, different sales managers, but we really have a systematic way of managing our territory and the contacts in it. So even though there is change, we are more of a long-term face to the customer, and that really helps. Like even now, I've got lots of people, engineers who are retiring, and they know where all the bones are hidden, right? But I've got my notes from all the years that I was there, because I was probably there when it was a new R&D project. And I can say, hey, this is what they were thinking about. This is why they picked this. And I still have that information to share to the new people who are coming in.
Wow. Yes, I think that the reps really have that. There's some pros and cons. So the pros are that you know where all the bones are buried and you know the customers, you know the ground level. I say what the biggest threat, if I look at the component industry in particular, is that digital innovation is changing things to the point where some of those engineers you talked about are kind of aging out, and those are the ones who had all that knowledge. The new ones coming in are accessing very differently, right, than those older engineers. So, what do you think about that, like with the digital innovation and how you're keeping on top of all those tools and how to access the young engineers.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think some of the new people are coming in. They just have different communication styles. They want to text or they want to email until you meet them and they get that you bring value and you can make their life easier. And, I think they just haven't experienced that maybe otherwise. And so, I've got one of our contractors that came in when he was new to go on an appointment with me and just understand our organization more. And one of the engineers said, I like that you're bringing in younger people also as part of that mix, right? And just making sure that the people who are calling on the customers have a way to connect with each other. So, knowing the technology, understanding how they want to connect. I feel like even though the pandemic's gone, we still have people who aren't 100% working in the office, right? And so it's really, I think, a respect thing to understand how your customer wants to communicate, when and what they want. And I think if you focus on those things, it can be easier. And certainly there are going to be people who will think that they can find everything on their internet. And if that works for them, then I guess they don't need me. But usually that works up to such a point. And then some more difficult project comes. And if we can be helping them get to production, great. I mean, it's usually they just don't understand the value that we bring in and that we can use their time wisely by not just talking about one process, but processes and materials and designing for them in different ways, and how that brings, part of our job is to help them look good.
Right. And you're interceding for them quite a bit. You're working behind the scenes at the factory. You're doing a kind of working for them on all kinds of angles. So trust me, I remember I would have to have really good relationships with all the factory people, know how to navigate the factory, know how to navigate internally at some of these big customers. So you know how to get what you need out of them. So I know that it's a savviness in the middle sometimes that you really need to have, and really a critical role in a lot of cases. But so what do you think as we have our young generation coming into potentially this industry, why would somebody young, you said you mentioned you have a couple young people, what is attracting them? Why would young people come into this industry? And it's still kind of a mature, right, industry. What is attracting them, and what would you say is the benefit for them to start looking to this model as a career?
Honestly, if I think about Jobst and why they might want to come to us, I kind of look at what our core competency is, but what is our company culture? And honestly, company culture matters. So, we are looking for people who are curious, that want to, they're not satisfied with the information they know, they want to keep learning. And are independent thinkers and do what they say they're going to do. And I think honestly, that's part of the attraction. One in particular, I think, they don't know anything about manufacturing. They don't know anything about sales, but they have, I can see what their skill set is. I can see how they are valuable. And as long as they're asking questions, and showing up and doing what they're saying, I think they like that atmosphere of innovation and the culture that we have grown.
Now, let me ask you a quick question too before I move on to the next question I have for you. Do they have to be engineers, or do you hire people that just have the ability to learn?
It's the ability to learn and to be curious and to ask questions. So, in my job in reality, it might have been good to have gone to school to be a chemist and a mechanical engineer and an electrical engineer. But that's not what I studied. I've got business and international focus, but I still, if you can tell me what you want done, I'll figure out how to get there. I'm a very independent person and I'm pretty savvy and I like to connect with people. So I think it's that I really like being in a place where there isn't just one right answer. And, understanding what principles will stay the same and which variables might change. I like being in an atmosphere like that. And that's very much part of the culture at Jobst.
Okay, so you make a very critical point because I would have to say, so not everyone's going to love me saying this, but I'm going to say it. Um,
Yes.
so what I found when I was in the rep world for so many years,
Yes.
a lot of the
Yes.
manufacturers would have a engineer type
Yep.
who was a
Yep.
sales manager,
Yep.
just didn't have the skill set to manage people. And I really think in a lot of cases they're two different skill sets. So if you're going to take an engineer and make them a manager of people, you should probably educate them about how to do that, because that was one of our biggest barriers. Is the, it was a very black and white, very and that's fine, these skills can be developed, right? But I think it's really important and refreshing to see when companies will allow people into a technical industry who have all the ability, like you said, they're creative thinkers, they're problem solvers, they're, can get things done. Why not take the reverse approach sometimes and go, okay, I'm going to take this person who can problem solve and teach them some technical capabilities, and they will learn over time. But anyway, that's just, I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I think that's great. And actually, some of the conversations I've been having with other peers, whether it's reps or other business owners, is for a while, the market for hiring has been rather tight. And I don't know that that's going to change anytime soon. And so part of the contractors that I've hired are, instead of trying to hire for an inside sales position, which I did and hired it 4 times. And it happened to be during the pandemic, which didn't help. But I never got, I wasn't able to hire a direct employee for this position. So what I've done instead is said, okay, this is the number of hours. This is the focus. Like one of our contractors is finding all the people that we're not talking to right now. Now, myself and my other salesperson can do that, but that's like one of the many things, right? And that should really be an ongoing thing. So their strict focus is just that, finding people we're not talking to. And the person I hired, is a college grad who only wanted to work 10 hours a week. I'm so lucky to have him. I don't know how long I'll have him. But he's bringing a lot of curiosity and knows how to think, right? But has really thinks it's interesting, this manufacturing world, this rep world, and has that curiosity and interest, honestly. So I think that makes a big difference.
Well, I think it's great. You're thinking very out of the box. And really, I just have a couple more things. It's like going fast, like I told you it would go. So what is, all of us as we're rising up in career journeys, and no matter where you get to, no matter what position, you always need mentors and you always need advisors, and we're always developing. And I have found personally for myself, it's like, the more you go along in life, the more you realize you have to learn. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like none of us are, we all still need mentors so much in our life. So who are your mentors, and what do you think about offering this mentorship? Look at your mentors, but also the people coming in and how they will need to be mentored. What do you think about that whole conversation?
Yeah, well, just to partially wrap onto the conversation we were just having, is I think millennials in particular are very much don't have the skill set of of understanding a business, and very much are curious and do want to be included. And so they like being brought to the table and being given direction. And I think a lot of that they haven't experienced. And for me, some of my mentors have certainly been my dad. I grew up with him. I worked in the business with him for quite a few years. He's still on my consultative board because, we can finish each other's sentences, and he just knows the language. So certainly he's at the top of the list. And then Charlie at Mana would certainly be a person who has a good system, who thinks strategically, always is got a good ear to listen and good feedback. I mentioned earlier, I'm in a Business Women's Circle, which is a local company, and they get you connected with other women business owners, and I find a lot of good ideas and networking and connection there. I also did the CPMR program. And so Karen Jefferson was one of the people who was working at Murph at the time, and Kate Roden is there now, and those people are certainly mentors. And I think I've developed a conference for other women reps who are in some sort of national association, and just again getting together with other women who are business owners and they're also reps. Oh, they get my world. The conversations that we have are invaluable.
So that's really important. I love that you said that. And what I heard from what you just said, so circling back on what I was talking about, the traits of a modern leader, one of the number one things that's on there is they care. And so when you go back to your mentors, they're people that cared. And I know because when I've had certain challenges, like I've come to you, I've used you as a mentor to come talk to and work through. And you actually offered me your dad, to talk to him. Oh my gosh, that was just, I will never forget that. So heartwarming. And Charlie, awesome guy. I don't know him as well as you, but just was able to have a conversation with him just a couple times, and is just a lovely, lovely human, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
all these people you're mentioning are truly people who have the ability to care. And that is really what mentors should be. So when we're thinking of our young talent coming in and you're thinking of all these potential opportunities, I agree with you. Our young millennials are creative and innovative, and they want to help, and they want to, we have to embrace them, mentor them, and care how they're doing, care about their development, because I think we have been in a generation that has put them down so much. It gets me really upset because I can't stand a generation of kids who hears all this anti
Right.
millennial talk. I think it's so destructive. So all those people who put down millennials all the time, I wish they would just stop doing that. But I do think that we have to show them we care, right? Work through all the challenges with them. They're not going to be perfect. They're coming into our corporations with certain sets of challenges, just like we all have in life, but we mentor them through, we care, and they will get there. But with that, I wanted to ask as well. So here we are, we've been talking, you and I, for
I
years, and
know.
connecting and reconnecting. And so what do you think? So you are, you own your own rep business. You started your own women's group, right? You've
Mm-hmm.
been a part of MANA on the board, and role model for a lot of people to break through barriers and navigate. And the thing I love about you is your attitude is always so good. You're very positive with men and women, and I love your refreshing attitude. But what do you think is the value for, like, here we are, like,
I
women
know.
in electronics and us, like, how do we work together to support each other, right, as we're moving
Mhm.
forward?
I think for starters, it started how we started. We started having conversations. We started getting to know each other, and what the direction of what you were trying to do with your industry. And I think where we really have commonalities is about bringing diversity to our work industry that we've been in for a long time, and how do we invite people in? What do those invitations look like? And I think that with the tight labor market, we need more people, and why not women, right? Why not? So I think that's something that we're going to have conversations, you and I, about for a long time.
Yes, well, I appreciate that. And for men that are listening too, is what does that invitation look like? I love that you said that, because so many people say they support women in business, in our industry, in the electronic component world. The best we could find is at best 10% of women in leadership roles.
Wow.
So a lot of women in the industry, but not in those decision making at that leadership table. It's not, so we still have a lot of work to do. But for the men listening too, to say, what does that invitation look like? Right.
Absolutely.
And yes.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly, I'm sometimes a little bit more casual person, and I honestly mean it's like, have you considered? Because I'm telling you, I grew up in this business, and it was all around me, and I wouldn't have considered it until somebody said, "Have you considered?" So it can be something very simple. You don't have to overthink it. Also for rep owners who are thinking about selling their company, just thinking about in the pool of people, there should be, I would guess there would be some women who might be good candidates for that. And, when you invite people in to have conversations about your business, who's curious about it? Who wants to know more? Who's a good listener? Who's paying attention? Some of the, we all bring different skills, but I think that within the pool of people who are looking, don't forget to invite women to the conversation.
I agree with that too. And for associations listening, why not have women not only a part of the organization, but why not have women in some of these leadership roles as well, representing industries? Why not having women come who are participating in the industries? So I love this whole conversation. So Michelle, it went by fast. We are now concluding our interview. And any final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, I just want to have your listeners think about, as they're moving forward, how can you make your business open to continue to grow, maybe long after you've gone, and maybe you can sell your business to somebody else. So keep your eyes and ears open for good candidates, whether it's female or male, for those positions.
And they might not all the time be an engineer, right? And
Oh,
sometimes, just to conclude, like maybe sometimes the rep organizations have to sell that to the manufacturers because the manufacturers always want, so we want an engineer. Well, maybe that's the savviness that the owners need to have, is to go to their manufacturers and say, it's my business. I'm going to hire who I think is the right person. And
yeah.
they can learn that. So it's a little give and take there too. So yeah. Anyway,
I do have one story on that last item. And I think when I first started and I would go out, and when I went on appointments with my dad, he seemed to have all the answers. Granted, he'd been doing it for 25 years, but as the new person, I'm like, okay, like, well, where's the book? And he's like, what book? And I'm like, the book where when I'm done reading it, I know all the information, which got a good laugh. But I think the point is, although it's hard to go in front of an expert and try to be helpful to them because you're not bringing the same level of experience, all they really care about is, they want, are you going to do what you said you're going to do? Are you going to ask the right questions? Are you going to listen? Are you going to write them down? Are you going to be showing up regularly? That's what they care about, because there's plenty of salespeople, whether it's direct or reps, who, might not be doing the best job. And they, in the end, want to do it well at their job. And if we can help them, they'll be your biggest pal.
I agree 100% with that. And with that, we're concluding the interview. And I so appreciate you being here. I've been wanting to interview you, right, for a long time. So thank you for being here, Michelle. And I just wish you the best in your business.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, Jackie.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.